Hey friend, welcome to the Sleepy American. Before we drift into nostalgia, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from and how old are you? I love seeing our calm little community span across ages and places. If this kind of soft story-rich history helps you unwind, a gentle like and a quiet subscribe would mean a lot. Now, breathe in, breathe out. And let's step back to the 1960s. Imagine entering a room where the day never really begins or ends because light is always present, soft, steady and humming with purpose. Rows of wooden switchboards glow like a constellation, each tiny lamp a star waiting to be touched, each cord a little bridge between two distant lives. You hang your coat, smooth your blouse or straighten your tie, and settle onto the high swivel stool that creaks just enough to remind you you're here. The headset rests over one ear, foam, wire, a small microphone poised by your cheek, and your fingers find their place at the chord pairs as if they have known this choreography for years. A lamp blinks, your hand moves without thinking. Number, please? The words are calm, practiced and kind, and in the half-second before the reply you can hear the room, a chorus of clicks, soft voices, ringing keys, and the sighing breath of machinery doing exactly what it was built to do. The board has its own language, and you're fluent. Each jack is a doorway, each plug a knock, each lamp a gentle tap on the shoulder. You answer with your left hand, connect with your right, and watch the supervisory lamp to confirm a conversation has taken hold. It's a rhythm like knitting, steady, detailed, and somehow soothing. The callers are strangers and neighbours in equal measure. A woman wants the drugstore before it closes. A boy is calling his father at the factory. Someone needs the hospital and there's no time to hesitate. You feel it all flow through your fingertips. Urgency, routine, tenderness, irritation, relief. The world is out there, but it runs through this little window of light and wire, and your job is to keep it moving. Sometimes you can tell a caller by the way they breathe. Old Mr. Callahan clears his throat twice before he speaks. Mrs. Alvarez's voice is a warm blanket, quiet, unhurried, always ending with "Thank you, dear." There are party lines on the rural circuits, shared connections where eavesdropping is a temptation and politeness an art, and you learn to wait an extra beat before breaking in to say lines in use with enough gentleness to save everyone's dignity. You learn the rush hour pulse too, after-school chatter, dinner-time plans, the hush that follows when families gather around the television and the board cools for a breath or two, operator lamps resting like closed eyelids. Training taught you the mechanics, but the work teaches you people. Etiquette matters, names matter. Good afternoon, Dallas operator. Evening long distance. Hold please. I'll try your number again. You balance courtesy with speed, because when the lamps bloom all at once, there isn't time for ornament. Your fingers dart. Plug, ring, listen, hold, clear, gentle, precise, never harsh. If you're too fast, you fumble and create a tangle. Too slow, and a dozen little lights brighten into impatience. The perfect tempo is quiet competence, a soft drizzle, not a storm. Between calls, you keep a pencil tucked behind your ear and a pad near your elbow for names, extensions, and the occasional note about a line that's acting up. There are maintenance quirks, the stubborn jack that needs a firmer push, the cord pair whose fabric sheathing has frayed just enough to feel rough against your fingertips. A senior operator might drift down the aisle, a guardian angel in sensible shoes, offering a small nod when your hands dance through a tricky transfer, or tapping the edge of your boards to remind you that the long-distance trunk is backing up. These are the rituals of the shift, as natural as coffee cooling in its thermos and the mint you let dissolve when your voice grows dry. Technologies are changing, you know it even if you try not to think about it. Direct distance dialing taking shape, area codes settling into memory, mechanical brains quietly replacing human ones. But for now, In this moment that smells faintly of warm dust and typewriter ribbon, you are the most important machine in the room, and you are not a machine at all. When the storm rolls in, someone calls to check on her sister across town, and the lines begin to hiss. You root around the noisy circuit, try another trunk, and listen for that blessed silence that means the connection took. When the power flickers, the emergency lamp winks awake. You go to the fallback procedures without theatrics. An operator's calm is contagious, and tonight you are the reservoir. There's a tender secrecy in what you hear. You do not repeat, you do not comment, you do not judge, you just connect. Lovers make cautious plans in the geography of sighs. A mother recites an address to a child like a spell, slowly, carefully, until the numbers live in his mouth. A factory foreman summons a crew. A doctor returns a call. A soldier rings home and asks, for no reason at all, what the weather is like in the kitchen, and you feel the room tilt for a second, as if the board itself understood the gravity of that question. Your own life is present the way a heartbeat is present, there, steady beneath the work. A pressed handkerchief in your pocket, grocery lists folded in your bag, a little calendar square marked for payday. You learn to love the small victories. Finding a person without a number because you remembered a cousin's shop on the same street. Calming a caller who's certain the line is broken when it's really the clatter of their own thoughts. Nudging an operator in another city with the kind of professional warmth that makes us smile through the wire. The work rewards patience and a good ear. It rewards the steady shoulder and the gentle, "I'm here." On a slow stretch, you notice how the cord weights hang like pendulums, how the lacquered wood reflects the lamps like evening on a lake, how the hum in the room settles into something that feels almost like breathing together. Night shifts have their own flavour. The calls stretch out like long shadows. There are fewer, but each one is more distinct. A baker starting at 3 a.m. asks for flour supplier numbers and whistles while he waits. A nurse on break calls her mother, not to say anything special but to hear a familiar voice. A jazz DJ at a tiny station needs the engineer, and you can hear the record's grain through his handset, a needle riding a late-night tide. In those hours, your voice grows softer still, and the board becomes a lighthouse. Blink, answer, connect, steady beam. Dawn is measured not by the sun, but by the return of familiar voices and the way the lamps begin to crowd together again, life resuming its daily weave. There is a posture to the job upright, alert but not rigid, and a kindness you learn to carry even off the stool. When someone snaps, you imagine the day they've had and hang no weight on it. When someone jokes, you let the smile travel through your voice so they can hear it, because smiles are audible if you place them just right. Your craft is the art of vanishing. You're present enough to help and invisible enough to let everyone else be the main character of their call. The wires remember nothing. You remember just enough to be useful and then let it go. Another lamp flickers. Another small world wants to find another, and your hands are already moving, the cord poised like a breath before a word, ready to bring one voice to another across the glowing field of tiny lights. Morning begins with paper, stacks of pale cards, their corners perfectly square, edges whispering when you fan them like a deck of quiet possibilities. The room has its own weather, the faint sweetness of paper dust, a trace of machine oil, the clean ozone hint that comes from circuits doing simple, honest work. You hang your cardigan on the chair back, set your pencil horizontal above the function keys, and slide into the seat in front of the key punch, a sturdy creature with a temper that's soothed by steady hands. The platen light warms the surface, the 80 columns stretched like a little horizon across every card. You place the first one under the guide, left edge flush, top aligned, fingers resting on a keyboard that looks like a typewriter's practical cousin. The instructor once told you that this is musical work, not because of melody, but because rhythm is the secret. Tap, tap, pause, punch, advance. A measure for numbers, another for names, a different one for dates that must be right or the whole batch drifts off course. You learn to read a coding sheet the way a cartographer reads a coastline. Field names march down the page. Account, branch, amount, date, check, digit. Each one claims a set of columns. The ruler of this world is alignment. Numbers lean to the right like careful guests at a crowded table. Letters stand at attention, left justified so the interpreter's print will land where it should. You press a key and the punch answers with a neat mechanical cough, a crisp rectangle of paper, Chad, falling into the bin that waits like a tidy snowdrift collector. In the early hours, the bin is clean. By midday, it's full of tiny confetti. A private blizzard that says you've turned thousands of intentions into a language the machine understands. The punch has moods, but it also has manners. The release lever bumps if a card drifts. The feed roller murmurs when it's time for a breath. The error lamp is a quiet little conscience. Your fingertips memorize the travel of each key, the feel of the spacebar that advances the card one column, the pleasure of function keys that leap the cursor from column 12 to 20 to 32 as if stepping stones were embedded in the stream. You don't look at the keys anymore. You watch the column counter and the card edge and you listen. Good punchers listen. A healthy strike makes a precise sound. Decisive, hollow, satisfied. A weak punch sounds apologetic. That's when you lift your hands, straighten the card, and begin the line again, because mercy here means accuracy later. Not all cards are equal. Some are naked and new, fresh from the carton with a faint chemical hiss when you separate them. Some are pre-printed with company logos and fine green lines, little fences that remind you where the fields begin. Program decks carry their own gravity. Columns 1 to 5 for sequence numbers, 6 for continuation, 7 often a sentinel, and the rest reserved for commands that will teach a mainframe to think in precise, polite sentences. You learn COBOL verbs like friends, move, ADD, perform, and Fortran's clipped elegance, and you punch them lovingly, column by column, because the wrong character in column 7 can derail an entire night's run. To keep order, you add sequence numbers in column 73 to 80, a safety net against a dropped stack, then run the deck through the interpreter so the program prints on the top edge, every line now readable by human eyes as well as the machine's. On the desk is the rubber band faithful companion, ready to loop around a finished deck with just enough tension to hold but not enough to warp. Verification is a ritual of humility. What your hands create, your hands must also challenge. You take the deck to the verifier, a sister machine with a different stance, and feed each card again. This time you type what the card claims to be. If your second typing matches the holes, the verifier hums a soft approval. If not, a bell rings, discreet but absolute. You breathe, backspace, and correct the offending column. 2 minds in one pair of hands, maker and examiner, conspirators in the simple miracle of getting it right. Some days you work with a partner, one punches, one verifies, and the trust feels like a duet. When the cards sail clean, the sense of rightness settles in your shoulders like a warm shawl. Around you, the unit record family keeps house. There's the sorter, elegant, self-assured, waiting to line cards by any column you choose. The pockets labelled 0 through 9 plus 2 for the zone punches, each thump of a pocket accepting a card like a librarian shelving a book. Nearby stands the collator, a diplomatic machine that marries 2 decks by a key, weaving them into a single stream. And in the back, the tabulator breathes like an old iron stove, adding columns of numbers with a comforting insistence, punching totals into summary cards, and spitting out green and white reports that smell faintly of ink and warm motor windings. In this ecosystem, your key punch is the gate. Nothing meaningful happens until a person sits down and speaks to paper in holes. Time moves differently at the punch. You measure mornings in batches, 2 batches before coffee, 1 after, a long-distance batch that demands absolute steadiness because the account numbers live like tightropes across columns 1 to 10. A serene hour building inventory records where descriptions bloom in uppercase letters, each word a garden that must fit its bed. The supervisor walks the aisle with a clipboard and a patient smile, answering your raised eyebrow with a nod. Yes, right. Justify that. Yes, zone punch for letters. Yeah, the check digit routine changed last week. New modulus, see the memo. You tape the memo above the board like a kitchen recipe. After a while, you don't need the tape. The routine lives in your hands. Mistakes teach a soft kind of courage. A mispunched card doesn't mean failure. It means a new card and another chance at perfection. You learn to zero your breath at the start of a field, to keep your wrists loose, to let the keys come up fully so the next strike is true. You learn to respect edgeware. Cards grow tired at the corners, and tired cards feed badly, so you retire them with the same tenderness you bring to fresh ones. And you learn the small physics of paper. Humidity makes it swell, dry air makes it snap. A clean stack fans smoothly like a well-shuffled deck. You keep a little brush to whisk Chad from the throat of the punch, and a tiny bottle of air to blow grit from the guides. Maintenance is a love language here. The people around you become a quiet chorus. There's Alma, who hums a lullaby only when she's punching dates. Lila, who sets a metronome on her desk and swears it helps. Henry, who can smell a bent card at 10 paces and has a poet's patience with the sorter's pockets. At lunch, you don't talk about computers as magic. You talk about them as colleagues who need good inputs to make good outputs. You laugh about the day someone fed a deck upside down and the interpreter printed its protest like a row of teeth. You swap tips, hold the card a beat longer on the first column, use a pencil line on the coding sheet to keep your eye from wandering, write the batch number twice, once on the wrapper, once tucked inside in case the rubber band goes brittle. Craft lives in these tiny cares. Sometimes you punch for science, not payroll. A laboratory sends measurements in spidery handwriting, temperatures, pressures, times with more decimals than you thought a second could hold. You carry the responsibility like a lantern. Other times you punch for people's lives in motion. Census forms, school testing results, the sort of data that builds maps of unseen patterns. You don't see the patterns here. You see rectangles and holes, but you sense the larger shape they're learning to describe, as if the room were full of invisible constellations and your job were to place each star in exactly the right sky. The mainframe room is a world away and also next door, separated by glass that keeps the climate strict and the mystery visible. Operators in white shirts feed your decks into card readers that drum like confident hearts. A panel of lights flickers with an intelligence you respect but do not envy. Out here, the intelligence is in human wrists and steady backs, in tiny rectangles of absence that mean presence to a machine. You watch a reader swallow a deck you built and you feel the odd pride of a bridge builder watching the first traveller step out across the air and arrive safely on the far side. Some afternoons, a programmer arrives, hat in hand and panic in the eyes. The compile failed. A period went missing somewhere in the packed instructions. You slide into your seat with a calm that has been earned the long way. Pull the faulty card, repunch from the listing. Scan with your fingertip the way a piano tuner listens. Verify interpreter. Ban the deck. Send it back like a small rescue boat returning to the storm. Later, a thank you appears on your desk in the shape of a donut or a violets packet from the florist on the 3rd. But the real thank you is the way the lights in the glass room settle into their steady conversation again. Even as you work, a future leans in through the door. Magnetic tape whispers of capacity, disks promise to summon data without the choreography of sorters and collators. But for now, the cards are king and the kingdom is kind. The rules are knowable, the craft is teachable, the feedback is immediate and fair. If you treat the tools well, they answer in precision. If you lose focus, the bell reminds you, and you begin again, which is not punishment, but grace. The work makes you a careful person, and careful is a kind of gentle that the world could use more of. By dusk, the Chad bin is a miniature dune field, and your hands carry the pleasant fatigue of a job that asked for attention and received it. You stack the last batch, square the corners with a practiced tap, slip a routing card on top with its neatly written destination, and loop the rubber band with a small twist so it holds without biting. Around you, the sorter clicks its last sequence for the day, the collator exhales, the tabulator's carriage returns to the left with a satisfied thunk. You brush the platen clean, cover the keyboard like tucking in a sleeping child, and feel the odd quiet pride of someone who spends their hours translating the world into a code of tiny absences that make big presences possible. A stewardship of wholes that somehow adds up to connection, to order, to meaning, to the simple human promise that information, if tended with care, will find its rightful place. The day begins warm, not from sunlight but from the metal itself, heat radiating from a squat pot where the alloy waits like a patient river, grey and shimmering, ready to be poured into meaning. The machine looms with a kind of friendly gravity, a forest of levers and cams, brass magazines perched like organ pipes, a broad keyboard whose letters are arranged for speed rather than the alphabet's nicety, because language here is measured in frequency. Your fingertips hover over ETAOI, NSHRDLU, that peculiar lineage of most used letters, and the first press is a promise. A matrix drops, a small brass mould with a character's face carved into it, sliding into the assembler with a crisp, satisfying tick. Another press, another matrix, a tiny rain of symbols becoming a sentence you can feel. You learn the cadence the way a pianist learns scales. Consonants land with purpose, vowels in between like breath. Each matrix carries a raised notch, a private code so the machine can send it home later, but for now they gather shoulder to shoulder in a line, waiting for the spaces that make thought legible. You call for space with thumb movement, and the space bands, wedge-shaped, humble heroes, slip in among the matrices. When the line reaches measure, you pull a lever. The machine brings the line to the jaws where the mouthpiece waits, and the pot tilts with steady confidence. A sigh of molten alloy flows, finds the hollows of letters, chills in an instant, and the theta machine presents a warm slug in your palm, a full line of type, cast and literal, sentence, a sculpture weighty enough to anchor an idea to the world. The composing room breathes in layers. There is the sweet, ghostly scent of ink, somewhere in the back where galleys will be pulled, the honest metal smell of lead, antimony and tin, the faint waxy note of oiled cloths, the papery whisper of a copy pinned to a board with a steel spike. Keys clack in polyrhythm as other operators work their own lines, each machine with its accent. You can tell who's at which keyboard by the tempo, Joe's agile staccato for racing box scores, Alma's even mezzo for society columns, your measured and elastic pace for a long editorial that asks you to weigh every comma as if it were a hinge. On the side table, the proofreader's marks sleep in red grease pencil, carrots, loops, a tidy vocabulary of nudges that will soon visit your desk like calm, practical advice. Not every line behaves. Sometimes a matrix sticks high, a reluctant brass guest refusing to seat fully, and you feel it with the same profile sense that makes you notice a picture frame slanting a degree to the left. You stop lift the line, straighten the offender with a printer's gentleness, and set it back so the justification can work its quiet geometry. Other times the metal cools a heartbeat too early, and the slug shows a shallow bite, a scum, a fin. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make you recast because this craft suffers no fuzziness. If things truly go awry, if a line assembles wrong and cascades, you know the rituals. Lift out the matrices, send the miscast to the hellbox, tap the machine's cheek with a small spanner like a violinist adjusting a string, reset your shoulders, and begin again without hurry. The keyboard is your instrument, but the distributor is the machine's memory. After casting, the matrices ride up an elevator, pausing at the top like a choir-catching breath, then flow onto the distributor bar where tiny teeth rid those notches and release each matrix into its proper channel in the magazine. Watching it is like watching birds find their roost at dusk. Each knows where to go. It is both mechanical and somehow tender. A misplaced matrix is rare, and when it happens you feel a parent's mild alarm. You halt, correct, listen for the clink of order returning to its groove. Between runs, you wipe matrices with a soft cloth, lay a drop of oil where experience says friction will attempt to argue with grace, and you check the pot's temperature, a number you carry in your head the way cooks carry oven settings. Copy comes to you in all tempers, a reporter's handwriting that gallops, a poet's neat small capitals, a municipal notice that must be perfect because errors there turn into lines at a counter and faces at a window. You learn the discipline of spelling habits, the moods of hyphens, the weight of a long dash placed to give a paragraph room to think. The column width is a law, and you feel the measure in your bones. When a word refuses to fit, you do the quiet math of syllables and fairness, deciding where to break so the reader's eye steps across the gap without stumbling. You tuck tiny notes under the copy. Cap this. Italic here. Watch this name. A friendly ghost speaking to your own future self, or to the proofroom down the hall. There is a private music to justification. You begin the line shy of measure, thumb the spacebands, and with each squeeze they creep a little taller, pushing letters apart until the spaces share the burden evenly. Good justification feels like a well-made drawer sliding home. Bad justification shows its seams, the river of white snaking down a page, the pinched gap that pinches the sentence, and your hands move to correct before your head can form a complaint. You learn when to thin a word, when to recast with a tighter synonym if the editor agrees, when to lean on the hyphenation table you keep at the edge of your mind like a prayer book. Elsewhere, hand compositors work at cases, the upper and lower that gave us the names for letter sizes, setting individual sorts into composing sticks, and you honour their patience even as your machine makes speed that would have seemed like sorcery a generation ago. You share a language, sorts and slugs, galleys and fourmies, leading measured in points, a pica rule smudged with newsprint. When your lines gather in a galley, you pick up the heavy rectangle and feel the promise of a page in the tidy weight of metal. You run a finger along the slugs, never the face, always the shoulder, looking for burrs that could print a ghost, nicking them smooth with a small stone or a careful file. Proofs arrive like mirrors. You ink the form lightly at the proof press, roll the cylinder once, and the paper lifts to reveal what the day has been trying to say. The proofreader's red hand returns to you what the eye missed while the hands were busy. A transposed letter, a comma where a semicolon would breathe better, a tiny river forming where two lines made an unlikely friendship. You return to the keyboard without annoyance. Correction is not a rebuke, but part of the choreography, as natural as the wash of the roller. The revised line casts cleaner, and when the next proof arrives without marks, you feel a quiet click inside, the mind's version of metal cooling perfectly in its mould. There are moments of folklore too. A tired operator runs a finger down the home column of the keyboard. Ite oin shudlu, and the machine, dutiful, casts those nonsense letters into a line that will later be corrected. A signature of fatigue captured in metal. You smile when it happens on the night shift, a small proof that even machines see the human in their keepers. The hellbox under the bench grows heavy with miscasts and spent slugs, destined for the melting pot to be returned to usefulness, a lesson in economy and forgiveness that grows literal when you lift the ladle and pour again. Yesterday's mistake becoming today's clean line. Safety is a ritual best performed without drama. You tie your apron tight, mind the sleeves, keep a bucket of sand near the pot as tradition prescribes, even though you hope never to use it. You know the feel of heat on the forearm that means you're too close. You learn the respectful distance that lets the metal keep its dignity. A small burn happens, and you dip the fingertip in cool water, a reminder that craft extracts a toll and pays it back in skill. Over time, your hands acquire the calm alertness of people who work near heat and speed. Your movements grow deliberate without ever being slow. Between jobs, you talk with the pressman, whose world is drums and blankets and the careful art of make-ready. They respect the density of your slugs, you respect the tension they coax into a sheet until ink lands as a thin, even blessing. The editor passes with a page dummy pinned together. Blue pencil lines like marching orders. You mark the heads in larger sizes, reach to the auxiliary magazine for small caps, shift into italics when a title needs to lean. Display type is a different music, bold where running text is modest. And the machine indulges you with the same even temper, casting fat headlines that feel like the first notes of a brass section, warming up. The clock's hands move, but the work measures time in pages built. A feature spreads across 2 columns and a photographs block waits in a cleared window of the form. You and the layout artist negotiate in gestures, shuffling galleys until the balance feels inevitable. A math table arrives, a field of numbers that demands alignment so strict it becomes a kind of visual lace, and you feel the old pleasure of rightness when the decimal points stack like stars in a neat constellation. A wedding announcement asks for elegance, a shipping schedule asks for authority, a children's page asks for kindness in the way the type sits on the paper and invites eyes that are new to reading. Outside, the world is speeding toward phototype setting and paste up, and farther ahead, towards screens whose light is cold and infinitely rearrangeable. The talk has already reached your shop, delivered by travelling salesmen with bright brochures and by apprentices who read magazines with futuristic covers. You do not scowl at it. Tools change, but as your hand closes around another warm slug and you place it in the galley, like a tile in a mosaic, you feel the kind of satisfaction that belongs to weight and friction and the exactness of meeting surfaces. Words here are not a rumour, they are objects that could doorstop a breeze. When the editor reads the proof and laughs softly at a line that works, you hear it above the machines and turn back to the keyboard with something like gratitude. By late afternoon, the magazines have given up thousands of matrices and taken them back again, a tide that looks like order because you keep the shoreline clean. You brush the channels, check the distributor's bar for any tiny burr that might start to misread, add a pinch of new metal to the pot to keep the alloy true, and scrape the dross with a practiced wrist flick that leaves the surface shiny as a river at dusk. A new story lands on your copyboard, city budget, numbers stacked like polite bricks, and you set your fingers to the home column, listen for the soft machinery breath you've come to love, and let another line assemble, letter by letter, space by space, into a sentence that will soon have ink on its face and a place in someone's morning. The thought made literal in the weight of a small, perfect bar of metal. Before the sun has decided what colour to be, the morning has already chosen its sound, the soft clink of glass against glass, steady as a heartbeat inside the truck. The neighbourhood is a silhouette, chimneys and maple branches, front steps like small stages waiting for first light. You button your jacket against the hour's thin chill and tug the brim of your cap down. The air smells faintly of bread from a bakery 3 streets over and of dew lifting off lawns. Inside the insulated chest, bottles stand in tidy ranks, whole, skim, cream top with that pale line of gold near the neck, along with chocolate milk for the kids, buttermilk for the careful bakers, and a few extras. Cottage cheese, sweet butter wrapped in wax paper, eggs nested in cardboard like a secret. A block of ice sweating quietly keeps everything honest. You set the truck into a whispering roll, tyres soft over last night's gravel, and the route begins where it always begins, with a porch light left on like a handshake. The work has a rhythm and the rhythm has rules. Park close enough to carry 2 wire racks without hurrying, far enough to keep the engine's murmur from rattling the bedroom windows, step light on the walk, bottles on the right hand, empties with the left. Read the porch box first, metal lid frosted in winter, warm to the touch in July. Some houses have milk chutes by the door, a little doorway forgotten by architects now but perfect for this hour. You open, slide and close with a care that says you know there's a baby sleeping inside. Paper notes live under smooth stoned or clipped to the lid with clothespins. Extra cream for Sunday waffles. We're away this week. Could we try the new chocolate? You tuck replies under the stone. Penciled answers that tilt towards cheer without waking anybody. The trust is old and uncomplicated. You bring what was promised. They leave the empties rinsed and the account square at month's end. Envelopes sealed with a smear of flour from someone's hands at the kitchen table. You learn the houses the way a river learns its banks. The green door with the dog that means well, but still prefers your ankles. 2 whistles and a low hello, a biscuit from the pocket, and he's your partner for 12 steps. The porch with a loose 4th board you avoid on foggy days because it speaks too loudly. The family that puts a little flag on the mailbox if there's a change to the order, a homemade semaphore that saves you time. You learn the hour each kitchen wakens, Mr. Leon's kettle at 5:10, the radio in Mrs. Chang's window at 5:25, the first scrape of chairs in the Hatch household just before 6, sounds you only hear because you've become part of the street's prelude. The way the neighbourhood breathes in the dark isn't lonely, it's private, and you're a polite guest. The bottles themselves ask to be handled like language. No clatter, no guessing. You reach into the crate without looking because your hands know the shoulder of a quart and the neck of a pint. The cream top has its cardboard cap and its small paper coin to keep the cream safe from dust. You fit the cap with a soft rotational push until the tiny seams line up. Ice crystals spider silk the glass in February. In August, the bottle bead with sweat that makes your palms smell faintly of clean milk. You lay them in the porch box upright, labels facing the door because order is a courtesy that travels further than you might think. When you pick up empties, you listen for the small story they tell. Clean and rinsed means someone had time. A dried ring means the morning ran ahead of them. A chip on a lip goes into a separate crate so it won't cut the next day's mouth. Your uniform has pockets for more than hands. Paper route cards live there. Names, standing orders, little notches cut into the edges to mark special weeks. Some drivers keep a tiny pencil behind the ear. You prefer a stub that fits between ring and middle fingers as you walk. At each stop you read and remember. 2 quarts whole, 1 buttermilk. Ilk on Fridays, a pint extra cream for Mrs. Salazar when peaches arrive. You've watched the seasons roll through the dairy in these preferences. Strawberry stains on kids' smiles in June. Hot cocoa concentrate rescued from shelves the first night the wind changes. Eggnog that turns your truck into a hospitality cart 2 weeks before Christmas. Bottles rattling with a sound that feels like sleigh bells, even if there's no snow. People steady themselves with rituals, and you carry those rituals the way a postman carries letters. Precisely, lightly, without commentary. Behind this gentle front of house there's the backstage, the dairy waking at midnight. You've seen the bottle washer dominoes of green glass shoulder through steam, the pasteurizer's thermometer with its red column climbing and holding at the safe number. the bottling line's steady march as new caps snap down with a tidy pop. You've learned to spot a leaky cap before it makes a mess of a crate, the telltale milk sheen along the rim, and you know where the hose is coiled and how to wash a crate so the wood doesn't splinter with time. The plant foreman calls you kid, no matter your age, and slides a carton of chocolate milk toward your elbow on hot nights. A good route starts with good plant habits. Everything squared, everything cold, truck loaded with the heaviest items toward the cab and the quick stops near the door. The wire racks nested in a way that keeps the bottles quiet over potholes you could draw from memory. The world is changing, you know. The supermarket aisle grows longer each year like a polite threat. But at this hour and on this street, the old system still works because it carries something bigger than convenience. You see it when a young father opens the door in bare feet, hair a mess, and whispers thanks with a smile that admits he forgot the milk last night, but the baby won't know. Yeah. Then what when Mrs. Field, who moves slowly now, asks if you might carry the bottles to the kitchen table just for a week or two. And you do, setting them down beside the window where lace curtains let the morning in like truth. You see it in the notes written by children for the first time, block letters that say PLZCHOCLET, and you leave the pint with a small doodle on the cap, a lopsided star that will make a refrigerator door seem magical. Winter teaches a different set of courtesies. Caps pop in the cold, pushed up by cream that rises like an eager student. You wrap bottles in yesterday's paper to keep them from freezing solid on the step. You tuck them deeper into the box if the wind cuts from the river. Your breath ghosts and your fingers ache until the truck's heater catches its stride. You keep an extra pair of gloves on the dash, an offering to yourself you accept when the first pair goes stiff with ice. The streets crunch, the sky brightens like a page turning. Ice turns the front walk of the blue house into a slide, so you walk the side yard where the grass holds your step. You feel like a caretaker and the title fits. Summer has a counterweight. Porch boxes turn into ovens. You add a sliver of ice to each box if the note says milk by noon. A small extravagance the dairy will understand when you scribble it in the margin. Dogs pant at screen doors like polite furnace grates. The smells change. Cut grass, tomatoes, somebody's bacon at a house you never see awake any other hour. You learn which houses will have a sprinkler to dodge, and which older porches hide nails waiting for ankles. You carry a jug of water under the seat and a clean towel over the seat back. You drink at red lights and dab your neck with the towel like a ball player. The job is movement, but not haste. Hurry makes glass loud, and loud wakes babies, and that's a kind of sin. There are emergencies that aren't dramatic, but matter a great deal. The hospital calls at 4 a.m. for extra bottles for the maternity ward because a late-night wave of arrivals has emptied their supply. You say yes because you can, and because you remember the feeling when a neighbour did something easy for you at the exact right moment. A school needs half pints for an assembly, and you rearrange the truck as if shuffling a card trick, making space where space wasn't. During a storm, power drops on the west side and refrigerators go quiet. You knock softly on 2 doors where you know new mothers live and suggest moving the bottles to a neighbour's house with a generator, offering your truck's ice for the journey. The word milkman carries weight on those mornings beyond the bottles themselves. You keep a ledger not just of orders but of people. The Mulligans argue, loudly but fairly, and always make up by Thursday. You can tell because the note returns to its usual handwriting. Mr. Boardseer, Singh, tips in coin envelopes written on with tidy script that teaches you your own name again, letter by letter. A young couple goes from 1 bottle a week to 3, and 4 months later the curve dips back to 2. You leave a small congratulations on a scrap of order form, and the next week find a note on monogrammed card. Her name is Ruth. Sometimes you're asked to carry a bouquet inside because the dairy van gets places faster at this hour than the florist's cart, and you agree because the ribbon matches the handwriting on the envelope, and whoever it's meant for deserves to see it while the light is still soft. The route is commerce, yes, but also choreography. The same steps taught over decades and danced new each day. Once in a while your mind flicks to the farther loop, the cycle that makes sense of all this repetition. Empties become rinsed bottles become washed bottles become carriers for something that came from a pasture you've walked, where cows stand black and white against a hill where, like punctuation marks in a poem that has never once failed to make its point. Glass goes out, glass comes back. Dents circle back to the plant where a man named Eddie taps lips and shoulders with a careful fingernail and retires the ones that have done their duty. Even the caps make a last contribution. Kids use them for crafts, clattering in shoeboxes under beds, turning into game pieces for rules invented on stoops and then forgotten at dinner. Near the middle of the route there's a house with twin bicycles on the lawn, laid down side by side with their pedals kissing, as if they were parked by a kind of gravity you wish the whole world obeyed. You place 2 pints of chocolate milk in their porch box every Friday without fail, and sometimes on Tuesdays when a game goes long at the field and the shadows say it's been a day. Across from that, a porch with a wind chime. The shape of little cows sings in any weather, because the alley funnels a breeze just so. You come to expect the sound as a kind of mile marker. The truck knows the turn by itself now, as if roots can teach machinery to remember, and maybe they can. If ever you doubt the purpose, on those mornings when the alarm's insistence feels unnecessary and the bed argues with more eloquence than any politician, you think of how milk behaves when it pours, the way it lines the inside of a glass, cohesive and white and reassuring as a truth that doesn't need flourish. You think of small bowls on kitchen tables, cereal snapping as it meets the cold, of coffee receiving its cloud and becoming the gentler colour everyone prefers, of a cat's careful lap and a child's first moustache that makes a room laugh softly. The bottles in your hands are tickets to these moments, and the ticket taker's job is to show up and clip the corners cleanly, keep the line moving, make sure everyone gets where they meant to go without fuss. And so you keep stepping porch to porch, the wire racks warm against your palms, the glass speaking in a quiet language you've learned to understand, the first bird starting up in the trees like a rehearsal that's decided to become the performance. Light works its way across the street and turns the truck's hood into a mirror. Somewhere, a kitchen clock ticks a little faster as the house wakes. You lift the lid of another porch box, see the rinsed bottles nested inside like a thank you said in glass, and you trade old for new with the small satisfaction of a promise kept. Then you straighten the note under its stone and move on, the street unspooling ahead of you like a ribbon, with just enough shine to show you where to place your feet next. The booth lives above the world like a quiet lighthouse, a narrow room with thick glass windows that look out over rows of seats waiting to become an ocean. You unlock the door with a turn you've repeated so often that the key answers by feel alone, and the smell meets you first. Warm dust, hot metal, a trace of oil, and that unmistakable film scent. Acetate sweet and a little vinegary. A perfume of stories kept on thin, flexible memory. 2 projectors stand side by side like patient horses, A and B stenciled on their bases, each with a real arm outstretched, each with a gate ready to hold a frame so still that movement can be born from the strobe. You touch the housings as you pass, a greeting. The port windows, small, double-paned, angled just so, wait for their beam. Down below, the curtain is still closed, a red hush. The house lights do their gentle work. The audience enters, murmurs, settles, their shadows crossing the screen, the way clouds cross a field before rain. You start where the light starts. In the carbon arc lamp house, older but still faithful, you check the rods. Negative and positive faced just right, their tips trimmed to sharp, clean cones. Later machines will burn xenon with a steady white heart, but this booth still knows the ritual of striking an arc. You nudge the feed so the carbons will kiss and erode evenly during the reel, Too little and the beam will sputter. Too much and the crater grows lopsided and the light turns sullen at the edges. You check the mirror, a deep polished eye that gathers what the art gives and throws it forward. The dowser is closed, always closed until the moment, because light must be kept like a secret. Beside it, the sound head warms. There's the exciter lamp, a narrow beam that will read the film's optical soundtrack, jagged little picture of voice and music, and send it to a photoelectric cell, then to an amplifier humming softly through the wall. You listen for the healthy hum. Too quiet means trouble. Too loud means a ground somewhere has forgotten its manners. On the rewind bench, the shipping cans sit open, steel lids leaning against the wall like shields. The reels have arrived with brown paper leaders penciled with theatre names and showtimes from towns they've already visited. A geography of screens that reaches farther than your booth can see. You break the travelling splice and lift a reel with both hands, respectful of its weight and the way it spins if you let your wrist get lazy. Film is miles disguised as inches. You set the reel on A's upper arm and pull the leader forward to the feed sprocket, guiding it against the teeth until it sits in the pleasant way that means the perforations and the machine have agreed to a partnership. Through the upper loop, across the gate down past the intermittent, little Geneva gears that turn continuous spin into that stop-start magic. Past the sound head, forming the lower loop with enough slack to let the frame breathe. Over the rollers onto the take-up reel. Every roller has a voice, and you listen for the one that isn't singing in tune. A dry bearing, a sticky guide, a felt pad that wants replacing. You check the aperture plate in the gate, that thin piece of metal that shapes the image. Tonight is flat, 1.85 to 1, wider than the old Academy, narrower than scope, so the plate with the right window slides home. If the feature were cinema scope, you'd change the lens to the fat, lovely anamorphic that squeezes and unsqueezes the world, and you'd drop in the plate that matches it, then thumb the masking switch so the curtains on the screen itself move in to meet the picture. A ballet of rectangles, the audience never knows you're dancing. You roll the framing knob just a touch to center the frame line so shadows of the splice won't appear like an eyelash on the eyeball of the show. Focus is set with a practiced in and out until the test grid in your head goes quiet. You run a scrap leader, countdown numbers, SMPTE marks, edge codes, fluttering white against the gate while you peer through the porthole and twist the focus barrel to where perforation edges become crisp and then disappear from thought. Trailers first. You've built a little pre-show reel earlier, cartoon and newsreel if the booker sent one. The feature presentation snipe with its fanfare, the house policy card, the smoking reminder from a decade that had different ideas about air. Splices hold it all together. Cement on acetate if you're old school in the bench's wet corner, or shiny tape splices with beveled edges that whisper through the gate. Your splicer sits with its guillotine blade honed and its pins clean. You feed both ends, align at the frame line, press, and hold a beat so the bond can take. A good splice is a handshake, a bad one is a cough the audience will hear even if they don't know why. You label changeover cues with a Chinograph pencil if they aren't done there already. Little circles in the upper right of the frame that flash at 8 seconds and again at 2, the first to warn and the second to move, what some people call cigarette burns, though any projectionist would prefer no cigarette anywhere near a booth. Down in the auditorium, the curtain shifts almost imperceptibly as the air system breathes. You see it because you look for such things. You glance at the clock. The manager's knock at the booth door is polite but punctual. Trailers at the half hour, feature at the top. You nod, point to the 2 projectors like a conductor showing his section, and he leaves you to it. You open the port glass and lean half a shoulder into the frame, scanning rows for trouble. A seat that sprang, a kid testing a flashlight on the screen in a way that will be charming for 3 seconds and intolerable for 4. Quietly you radio the usher with a word that means Thank you now. The booth is watchtower and workshop both. The changeover is the craft's heartbeat. Reel 1 sits ready on A, Reel 2 waits on B, with its leader threaded to just behind the first frame. Gate closed, motor idling, exciter lamp warmed, sound switch riding its little neutral. You open A's motor, the flywheel takes the speed up smooth and sure to 24 frames per second, 90 feet of film per minute, the rate at which illusion becomes agreement. With the dowser still shut, you give the take-up a little coax to be sure the clutch is feeling cooperative. The first Q dot flashes in the corner of the trailer's last shot. You lift your right hand, not to move yet, but to let your body know the dance is happening. The second cue appears, and in one motion you open B's motor, crack its dowser, and close A's. Picture change so clean that if you do it right, no one knows there were two machines involved in the room's new silence. At the same time you flip the sound selector from A to B on the rack so the music doesn't take a hiccup. The curtain opens a hair wider when the feature presentation leader plays, the masking obedient, the screen now its largest proper self. Between reels you tend. Carbon rods shorten, you watch their shadows inside the lamp house through the mica window, and adjust feed knobs by touch while your eyes stay on the screen. A lowering light level steals contrast before the audience names it. You catch it and correct. The gate collects a dust mote and embers it into a dancing speck on the sky in some outdoor scene. You see it like a gnat at dusk, and at the next cut, snick the dowser, slip the gate open, brush once with the soft camel hair tool, close, and bring the light back before the cut is over. If the print hums, you ease the sound roller. If the bass rattles a porthole, you lay a folded bit of paper under the glass clamp. The audience never knows, which is the point. Good projection is kindness made of small, uncredited acts. Sometimes the film talks to you in less polite ways. A splice from a previous house fails and you hear the low slap, slap that means the loops are shrinking and the take-up is sulking. Your feet move before the thought has a name. Motor off, dowser down, hands on the free ends, a clean cut at the frame line, a fast tape splice, 3 firm rubs with a thumbnail for heat, a breath to steady, loops rebuilt with the size you trust, motor on, dowser up, sound back a hair early so the audience hears the room again just before they see it. You log the stop and the reason because records matter. Someone will want to know, and you will want to remember. If a tear races along the perf edge, and the guide roller starts chewing, you let the film free, cradle it, and curse softly with the tenderness you'd use for a child's torn sleeve. Aspect ratio changes have their own theatre. A flat short gives way to a scope feature, and you become a stagehand with optics. You unlatch the lens turret, swing the scope lens into place with a sure click, drop the new aperture plate, run a few feet of leader to check that heads aren't cropped and feet aren't hidden, and hit the masking switch so the screen widens like a breath taken fully. On the sound rack you switch to the curve the print wants. Older optical mono A-type if you have a Dolby kit retrofitted, or just the house EQ you know by ear for this room. You level the dialogue until voices sit in the seats instead of hovering above them. Showmanship lives in millimeters and decibels more than in speeches. When the audience laughs together, you feel it through the floorboards even up here. When they gasp, there's a draft that lifts the hair on your arms. A picture with a quiet center will make the booth itself seem to hold its breath. A chase will flicker across your hands as if the light has rhythm. You watch the frame lines ride steady. You watch the faces in the front row reflected in the port glass and decide if the focus wants a touch at the corners, a half twist you'll give during a pan. You watch for keystone and let the lens axis nudge toward perfect. Your eye learns the screen the way a mariner learns a coastline. What looks right and what won't in this particular room with this particular throw. On the bench, leader piles grow, head leader with countdowns, tail leader with picture ends in blue letters, snipes for no smoking, please don't talk, and this beloved intermission tune that invites popcorn and reminds couples they have exactly 9 minutes. You've spliced in the cue tape for the house lights, slow rise for credits, half up for intermission, then down like dusk when the next reel's first cue comes. The light board in the booth ticks with relays you've tuned to a gentleness that flatters the screen. If the manager wants a curtain move on a swell in the overture, you count measures during the main title and close at the bar that makes the room feel as if it's exhaling on purpose. Prints tell their history on their edges, green emulsion scratches from a careless rewind, black bass scratches from a relay that fought the film back, cinch marks from a too tight wrap. You log them, you call the distributor for reel needs replacement, and you say please because they're sending you another person's future headache solved today. If a reel arrives with head and tail swapped, you feel the odd thrill of a small mystery and fix it with the respect due anything that passes through many hands to get here. Sometimes you run a midnight show for a crowd that knows every line and speaks with the characters as if they were cousins. Sometimes it's a matinee where a child sees a dragon fly for the first time and ducks, a reflex you can spot in the first 5 rows. The booth welcomes them all the same way, with a square picture, steady sound and light that doesn't flicker unless the story asks it to. Between shows you cover the projectors with canvas that keeps dust honest, wipe the port glass with a cloth that never sees cleaner because residue lowers contrast, and write in the logbook whose columns are neat even when your day wasn't. Rewinding is its own meditation. On the bench the split reels click into the cause. You guide the film with 2 fingers like leading a dance partner through a turn, not too tight to avoid cinch, not too loose to make a mess for the next house. You inspect as the frames pass, frame by frame at a speed your eye can keep up with, noting a torn perf here, a suspicious splice there. A repair now will save a lurch later. The tail leader arrives with its clatter against the metal hub. You tuck it in, paper band the reel with a label you've filled in completely, because someone else will be grateful for your handwriting far from here. Reels go back in cans, heads properly out, a gentle landing for a thing that for 2 hours was nothing less than a dream given shape and sound. There is safety in this room and you attend to it without ceremony. Fire cans sit where they should. The floor stays clear so a step backward isn't a stumble. The motor belts you keep spare hang on 2 nails like sleeping snakes. A broom waits in the corner because cranes shed dust and box labels shed paper, and both become a hazard if you let them. You have a burn scar on one knuckle from a dowser touched too soon after a long reel, and you wear it like a small diploma. The machines reward respect and punish hurry, and that seems like a lesson with uses beyond the booth. When the projector runs well, it purrs like a cat you're not looking at. You learn to trust that sound and to mistrust anything that asks you to stop listening. If a manager comes in chatty during a changeover, you smile and put a finger in the air for one breath. Not scolding, just choosing the show, and they understand because they've seen your hands move without looking. The way fishermen's hands move when the line tugs or a tailor's when a seam threatens to pucker. There are skills hidden in this quiet room that few people notice until they are missing. The absence of hot shots, the way credits are readable edge to edge, the way a real tail never slaps the screen because you've padded it with leader, as if tucking a child into bed. There is also the small theatre of secrets you carry. You know which couples hold hands and which don't, which row prefers the aisle for knees, which joke lands better on Tuesdays for reasons no calendar explains. You see the usher's flashlights make little comets in the dark. You see the candy counter light when the door opens and a child's face lift as if a moon just rose. You keep all of this and you say nothing. Your job is to tend the light and the thin ribbon that feeds it, and to let everyone else believe that screens glow by themselves and stories arrive intact without sweat. And so your night continues in that calm cadence, arc feeding, reels turning, cues blinking, dowsers answering, focus breathing, a whisper here, a whisper there. From the booth's high window, the beam goes forward in a bright tunnel that seems solid enough to touch, but you know it's only dust and timing and the math of shutters. The beam finds the screen answers, and down below an entire room leans toward the same place at once, listening with their eyes, while your hands rest lightly on the machine that keeps the picture exactly where it belongs, frame after frame after frame, an unbroken ribbon of light carrying the room from first title to the very next scene that's already waiting on B, spinning quietly in the dark, ready to arrive at the exact second your cue tells it to step into the beam. The lobby is a held breath, marble floors catching the first footsteps of the morning, like ripples on a lake that hasn't decided what wind to believe yet. Brass railings keep their own sunrise in a polish you can smell, lemon, wool, a hint of yesterday's newsprint carried by briefcases. You step behind the half-moon stand with its small ledger and bell, lay your gloves flat like a promise, and touch the call panel with a familiarity that never turns careless. The car is waiting where you left it, level to the marble, doors closed as if listening. You slip the key into the control escutcheon and turn. Somewhere above the ceiling, a relay wakes with a click like a polite throat clearing. The indicator needle, that dignified little arrow, rests on L. You breathe in the cool lobby air and then the elevator breath. Oil, warm dust, the metallic whisper of cable singing up a shaft that feels as tall as weather. Inside the car, the world is intimate and exact. There's the fan grille that spins like a calm idea. There are the round buttons with pearl faces and tiny incandescent halos, ready to be pressed by fingers that will always look a little more expensive in this light. The floor is rubber tile or carpet, depending on what decade the landlord prefers. Each square a geography you've learned to trust. The panel is yours the way a piano is a pianist's: start, stop, door to open, door to close, call, cancel. Alarm covered by a neat little flap because emergencies deserve discretion. You check the levelling, your eye knows when the floor sits a fraction high, and your foot knows how to nudge the handwheel under the panel, the smooth hidden disc that lets you bring your car flush to the sill so no heel catches, and no cart bumps a lip that can make a day worse than it needs to be. The interlock on the door handle says yes with a quiet magnetic assent. The cage light makes a soft box of the air. You take the stool only if the building is napping. This hour asks you to stand. First passengers are the early ones, the faithful. A florist with a bucket of green stems and a face that already understands colour better than most. A janitor folding his cap in one hand because he respects hats and thresholds equally. You say good morning as if the building itself is speaking through you. Not loud, not too monosyllabic, just enough to coat the silence with courtesy. Which floor? And you get answers that tell you more than the number. Somebody's late, somebody's rested, somebody's carrying a worry on their voice like extra weight in a pocket. You place the car in motion with a firm pull on the controller lever, a polished handle that pivots through a gate of notches you could find blindfolded. Acceleration is a thing you do with mercy. The brake releases with a felt thump, the motor hum shifts as the generator answers, and the car rises or sinks with the sort of confidence that keeps people trustful of boxes. Manual control is a conversation with gravity. Too much power and the car surges, too little and the brake drags the ride into a sulk. You learn to feather the handle so the cables sing in their lane and the guide shoes slide without complaining. Halfway between floors, the arrow trails behind the reality you can feel in your ankles. You match your eyes to your bones. A child once asked if the elevator knows where it's going or if you do. We both do, you said, and it was true in the way good partnerships are true. The floor arrival is an art of inches. You ease power back before the interlocks offer their first click. Let the brake catch you, not like a hand on a collar, but like a hand under an elbow, and bring the sills level with the stillness that makes people forget there was any motion at all. You open the door and the scissor gate almost opens itself if you set your wrist to it just right. A practice swoop that keeps the diamond lattice quiet. There is a choreography to crowding and comfort. You position a suitcase by your toe so it won't roll when the car starts. You angle a baby carriage to face the door in case the world needs to leave quickly. You talk to eyes, not shoes. In an older building, freight hours follow a posted rule: no deliveries after 10. And you keep those rules with a smile because rules kept with a smile are still rules, but they're less of a fence. When someone presses 3 and then an 8 by mistake, you cancel without making them feel like they did anything other than live a life where fingers sometimes have their own ideas. When the lunch crowd arrives and the car fills with perfume and pepperoni, with architecture students and a man who always smells faintly of rain, no matter what the weather says, you stand a little taller to make room for their day. Maintenance lives in your periphery like a guardian. You listen for a flat spot on a guide wheel long before it turns into a complaint you'll have to explain. You feel a lag in the brake coil and pencil a note for the mechanic who visits on Thursdays and swears by a brand of grease the company doesn't stock but always seems to have. You keep a rag tucked at the panel edge to give the brass a quick polish between rushes, because reflection matters when people glance at themselves on the way to a floor where reflection will matter more. You replace the tiny bulb behind 5 because it's dimmer today than yesterday, and dimmer is how neglect begins. Your hand knows where the stop switch lives, bright red and unambiguous, and what tone your voice will take if you ever have to use it. Steady, present, capable of turning a box into a room where a pause is not a panic. Some afternoons the building runs on small talk. Weather is the easy coin, but you mint it carefully. Supposed to clear by 3, not as prophecy, just as shared horizon. People tell you about interviews because doors make them confess. They tell you about grandchildren because elevators hold a second that can stretch if you add a question shaped like care. You learn names by floors long before introductions arrive. The saxophonist practices on 8. The dentist is on 12 and hands out toothbrushes like calling cards. The law firm on 14 moves like a school of fish in dark suits, and there's always one who nods at you as if you'd both survive something together, which in a way you do twice a day, ride after ride. There are rules that are not on paper, but might as well be engraved in brass. You never let a hand linger on the gate. You never let the car drift, high or low by the thickness of a newspaper. You correct and forget and correct again, because the mind keeps score even if the eye doesn't. You stand between playful children and buttons. You show them one they can press, bell, and let the little chime be their victory while you keep the service buttons yours. You accompany claustrophobia with a voice that makes the walls a little wider. You are neutral in arguments and kind in silences. When someone cries, you look at the door, not at their hands, and you give them a floor number and a tone that says you will stop wherever they need the world to pause. In the machine room, heat has a philosophy. Motors, the colour of old battleships, rotate with authority. Couplings turn with a dignity that prefers not to be pointed at, and the controller cabinet, rows of relays, coils and contacts, clicks and clacks like a well-behaved parliament. When the mechanic opens the door, Ozone steps out to shake your hand. You've been up there enough to know the names of things, and just little enough to know when to leave them alone. The governor rope, with its heavy flywheel and safety pawls, sits like a quiet promise nobody wants to see keep itself. The counterweight runs its gambit in the opposite direction of your car, a ballet you feel in the cable's song rather than see. When the mechanic cools down the shaft to test the brake, your answer is 2 slaps on the doorframe, the building's ancient version of a thumbs up. Fire drill days make the lobby a theatre of vests and clipboards. You flip the keyed switch that puts the car into fire service. Doors ignore hall calls, car responds only to your panel, stop at the lobby for the fire brigadier. So muscle memory layered over policy until the two feel the same. You speak the steps like a litany to the security guard who's new and nervous. Recall, lobby, manual control, phase 2, and you watch the doors obey like well-trained dogs while your ears map the stairwell door slams one by one. At closing time, you secure the car at L. Doors open, fan off, light dimmed to a hush that says this room sleeps with one eye open. There are days the building is a print of itself, and days it feels hand-painted. A bride rides in white, breathing differently, and you slow the start as if her dress were a flag you didn't want to ripple. A delivery man with a piano claims the car and you turn the switch to independent service, a private moment between you, him, a dolly, and a waltz of corners negotiated by inches. A dog looks at the floor indicator, then at you, then at the indicator again, as if you might confess how this trick is done. You don't, but you do lean down for a scratch because animals recognize the priesthood of operators, the way they recognize the priesthood of doormen and barbers. Old cars have a language of components you could recite in your sleep and sometimes do. Sills, shoes, jibs, rollers, selectors, safeties, cams. Newer ones arrive with push buttons and collective control and a mind that learns patterns, but even they appreciate a human who understands momentum and manners. You read the traffic in the building by minute and season. Accountants in March, fashion editors in September, a lull at 2:40 when school releases, and the lobby acquires backpacks that smell like gym floors and pencil shavings. Holidays add coats heavy with pine and cold. Some adds linen and the sound of sandals on marble that turns the lobby into a beach for a single bright second. Occasionally the elevator reveals the building's pulse with a hiccup that asks for grace. Power blinks and returns with the staggered apology. You hold the car steady with the brake and become the ground everyone needs while lights flicker. Someone wedges a hand between door and jam and sends the safety circuit into a sulk. You reset with a practiced calm that makes it look like nothing happened. In the rare moment, a car stops a half-foot shy and refuses the last inch. You pull the emergency phone for the mechanic and then do the truest part of the work. Stand there, present, voice even, body language unbothered, transforming a box from a trap back into a room by the simple trick of refusing to be afraid. You keep a little museum in your pocket, a folded timetable from the year the building opened, a polished token from a railway that taught your father about schedules, a silk handkerchief that once cleaned brass in a hotel where the bell captain knew everyone's name. Ritual keeps the day kind. At 11, tea from a thermos you pour into a cup that knows your hand. At 2, a peppermint that tells your breath to behave. At 4:30, a pause at the lobby window to watch the street turn gold if the sun is cooperative and silver if it isn't. The final hour stretches like taffy and then snaps neat. You wipe the rail as if polishing an instrument between movements. You make one last pass with your eyes across the panel for bulbs that have dimmed by more than a gentleman's amount. Evening brings a different weather into the car, wool softening, cologne warming, the tired laugh that follows a day neither good nor bad, but fully used. You ride people down to cabs and up to last meetings and across a handful of floors where a forgotten scarf or an unsigned file is waiting to be rescued. The building relaxes by degrees. The pointer spends more time at L and 3 than 14. You set the car to park where the night guard likes it. Centered, doors closed, a rectangle of brass and glass that looks like a mirror when the lobby is empty. You turn the key back to its vertical, the relays sigh, the arrow rests, and the shaft becomes a column of quiet threaded with cable and promise, while your gloves fold back into themselves with the memory of palms that have steadied a small moving room all day long without needing to announce it to anyone, letting the doors open and open and open at exactly the right inch, exactly the right second, as if courtesy were a kind of clock you kept wound with your hands. If you're still here with me, lying back with the lights low and the day finally letting go of your shoulders, thank you for travelling through those quiet rooms of the 1960s, rooms filled with warm machines, careful hands, and the small courtesies that stitched a neighbourhood together. Maybe you could hear the click of a switchboard lamp or the hush of a projection booth. Maybe you smelled the metal, the ink, the dew on a porch. Maybe a memory from your own family floated up, something your grandmother used to do, a uniform your grandfather wore, A tool that lived in a drawer nobody opens anymore. Hold that memory gently for a second. Let it glow the way an old radio glows in the dark. Not demanding, just keeping company. If you felt a little calmer listening to this, I'm glad. Before you drift, tell me a story in the comments when you get a moment. Did someone you love once work one of these jobs, or another that's quietly slipped away? What did their day sound like? What did it smell like? Oil, paper, fresh bread. Did they bring home little souvenirs of their work? Ticket stubs, a pencil with a company's name, a cap with a stitched logo. I read your stories like postcards from places time doesn't visit much anymore, and they help me keep these episodes honest and kind. If you're comfortable doing so, remind me where you're watching from in the world and how old you are. Our sleepy little map of listeners is one of my favourite things. Teenagers hearing this history for the first time. 80-year-olds smiling at details we almost got right. Night shift workers letting the soundtrack ride shotgun on the way home. It makes this channel feel less like a screen and more like a porch light left on. If this brought you peace, a gentle like helps the algorithm whisper this video to other tired minds who might need it. If you'd like more unhurried stories at bedtime, a soft subscribe and that little bell set to all will make sure future episodes tiptoe into your feed. You can also save this to a sleep or comfort playlist so you can find it again when the day gets loud. If you're already blinking slower than usual, don't worry about any of that. Let tomorrow you handle the buttons. Tonight you can simply breathe. If you're the sort who enjoys rituals, here are a few cozy ones that pair well with these journeys. Dim the screen a notch or two to rest your eyes. Lower the volume until the words feel like blanket edges. Set a sleep timer so the video knows when to bow out without waking you. Sip water or tea between chapters the way a projectionist checks the focus, lightly, attentively, without hurry. If you're listening on a speaker across the room, try placing it near the door. Shadows fall softer when the sound arrives from a little distance, like a voice down the hall telling a story you don't have to catch every word of to understand. If you'd like ideas for the next wander through time, leave a note with a job you think the world has quietly packed away. The lamplighter, the iceman, the human alarm clocks called knocker-uppers, the soda jerk, the telegram messenger, the stenographer whose shorthand could outpace thought. I keep a small notebook of your suggestions, and it has become a companion to my thermos. Always within reach, always half full. Your suggestions don't just guide topics, they carry your family's handprint, and that matters more than any search engine ever will. If you're awake a little longer, you can replay your favourite chapter like a loop of time coming in and out, or let this roll into another gentle episode on the channel. There's a whole shelf of slow stories waiting, each one built to hold you without insisting anything of you. And if sleep arrives mid-sentence, that's perfect. These words are happy to finish the trip without you, then tiptoe out and close the door softly behind them. Thank you for spending part of your evening here. The world you'll wake to tomorrow is loud and fast, but somewhere inside it there are still switchboards and milk routes and elevator bells, at least in the muscle memory of the people who loved them. They live on when we remember them kindly, when we tell their small truths out loud, when we make room for unhurried craft in our own lives. A neatly washed mug, a letter addressed in clear handwriting, a door held for a stranger because it's a nice thing to do, not because a sign told us to. If your eyes are heavy, let them be heavy. If your heart is full, let it rest there for a while. I'll be here next time with another slow walk through the ordinary miracles of work and care. And until then, may your room be quiet, your blankets warm, and your dreams full of gentle, useful hands.